question. The problem is once you assume the manager is responsible for engagement, then you start asking questions that are basically having you evaluate your manager. And the reason why engagement surveys and things are anonymous is because they're afraid that there's going to be repercussions when the person evaluates their manager. And they're right, there would be. If you take a different tact on it and you think about asking engagement questions that really amounts to what does the person want and how much do they feel like they're getting it, that's not an evaluation of the manager. And therefore, it does not need to be anonymous. You can start having a discussion around those things, just like the company can have a discussion around what they want and what's important to them.
Welcome to episode 27 of Leading People with me, Gerry Murray.
So there's two things that are important about engagement. The first one is what we've already talked about, is getting the right person in the right job. So getting them in a job that they feel passionate about, that they enjoy doing. That already is a big step for engagement. But there's another very important step, is that every person has expectations for employment. And the problem is those expectations are different. Some people want to have more development opportunities. Some people just want to be able to make, higher pay. Some people are really focused on even having, social connections at work. Everybody has something different that they're looking for. Some people are looking for autonomy. It completely varies. And we have about 18 different things that people want from their work. And part of our engagement is to really, assess and measure how much people want each of those things. And having those be a subject, because as I said, you have to look at employment as a two-way relationship. So the relationship is the company getting what they want from the individual? But the other side is the individual getting what they want from the company? And so in order to have a really good, long-lasting relationship, you need to have both of those elements fit, because a lot of organizations will say, our best people are leaving, how to retain our top talent? Well, you have to retain your top talent by finding out what's important to them. And what things they feel are fulfilled in terms of what's important to them. So there's actually two sets of questions, and by understanding that, you're able to have discourse with people to really work out a mutual benefit. Because people are so confused about employment. They think it's some kind of mother-father relationship or child relationship. It's totally not true. It's a business relationship. And it's a relationship in which you perform certain functions and you get paid for those functions. Those people are not, your employer is not your mother and father. And on the other hand, from the employer's point of view, the employee is not your slave. Okay, they're there. They're not a machine. They're not an asset. Okay, they're a person. They're an individual. People say, "Oh, employees are our greatest assets." What are you talking about? They're not assets. They're employees. They're people. They have their own ideas. They have their own needs. They have their own wants. They have their own ambitions. And it's if you want to have a good relationship with them, you have to work out what those things are. And you have to have a give and take process that deals with the relationship in both directions. That's a business relationship, no different than any kind of relationship you would have with a supplier or a partner or a business partner. You have to look at what works for both parties. Yeah, or a spouse. Yeah. How would you feel if you went on a date and the person at the date starts asking you, questions about, well, this is what I want. I need somebody who does this, this, and this, and this, and this. And they never bother to ask you what you want. I mean, how do you feel?
Well, I think there might be listeners out there already have their own experiences of these things. Hopefully not on the interrogation side of the equation, but I think there's been situations where people have cut those dates short.
Right. Yeah.
After
You
the
probably cut
interview.
and run, right? Because,
After the-
well, but that's what happens to people say, employers say, oh, people are leaving us, Well, you know what? It's a good idea if you look and see what you can do to keep that from happening. And what you can do is basically to really acknowledge the relationship and what's important to the other person. And not just give lip service to that, but where you actually measure it, have discussions around it.
Mhm.
I mean, we look in the organizations, we have performance reviews. Okay, I'm going to review your performance. Well, wait a minute. Isn't this a two-way relationship? Shouldn't we be looking at how has the organization given the person what they want in the last year? How is it working for them? Do they want something different? A performance review should be a two-way performance review.
Yes. And actually, I've had experience I can share with our listeners of clients using your tools and having better. Those become meetings, they become discussions, dialogue, they become
Right.
a sharing. It actually, believe it or not, it's easier on the manager because they're often feeling if they've been storing up that list of stuff. Actually, they can go in there and have a discussion, which is a two-way discussion, and understand the person in front of them better, and the person can understand the manager better. So it's actually they both come out feeling better.
Yeah, well, otherwise, all you're doing is treating the person like a child, and and you're going to trigger all their childhood reactivity as a result of that.
Yeah, because they're going in with a gun in the back pocket, saying,
Right.
"The minute you shoot at me, I'm going to shoot back." Right, and
Right.
so. Yeah.
And even if they don't say it's going to come out, and then people say, well, why are people having these crazy behaviors at work? Well, yeah, it may be because of that,
Yeah. Now, the other thing that weakens the employee satisfaction world a little bit and these surveys is this anonymity thing. And
Right.
you've got, I mean, surprise, surprise, there's a myth out there, I think, that okay, there's all sorts of legislation. Let's park that for a minute. But as long as you are complying with data protection, etc., within your company context, and that there's a myth out there that people won't tell you stuff. And what might surprise,
the problem with engagement is, in the way most people are measuring it, is based on assumption, and the assumption is that your manager is responsible for engagement. Right. And even organizations make their manager responsible for engagement. But the truth is, the manager isn't responsible for engagement. It's a mutual thing. The manager can help. But first of all, the manager, if the person isn't in the right job, the engagement is not going to happen, period, to start with. And if there's not mutual discussions based on mutual needs, it's going to be very hard to get that kind of engagement long term anyway. So that's the assumption. The problem is once you assume the manager is responsible for engagement, then you start asking questions that are basically having you evaluate your manager, right? And the reason why engagement surveys and things are anonymous is because they're afraid that there's going to be repercussions when the person evaluates their manager, right? And they're right. There would be. If you take a different tact on it and you think about asking engagement questions that really amounts to what does the person want and how much do they feel like they're getting it, that's not an evaluation of the manager. And therefore, it does not need to be anonymous. You can start having discussion around those things, just like the company can have a discussion around what they want and what's important to them.
Yeah, and I can tell you from experience, just through my acquaintances, a lot of managers dread the the employee satisfaction survey when the results are being published because they're praying that they're above the average, right, on that score.
Well,
because if they're not, they're told fix it, but they don't know how to fix it because they don't know. If you've got a team of 40, 50 people, you don't know where to start.
It puts the manager in a horrible position because the manager, firstly, one important part of their job is to hold people accountable, right? Mm-hmm. And so they have to hold people accountable. And at the same time, if you start putting them under that kind of stress and say basically engagement is the manager's responsibility, all you're going to do is to reduce the manager's tendency to hold people accountable, right? Because when they hold people accountable, sometimes those people don't like it, right? Right. So then all you're really saying to the manager is, we're going to evaluate you based on you having people like you. And that's wrong. That is completely wrong.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's going to have a really unintended consequence, which is the manager's going to say, well, okay, if that's how you're going to evaluate me, I'm not going to hold them as accountable. Right.
No, that's
hold people accountable.
Absolutely true. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have a situation whereby either people hold back on their true opinions, or they deliver anonymous feedback to a manager, and then the poor manager is lost, and as you say, maybe overcompensates to make sure that they don't upset people coming up to the employee satisfaction survey.
The framing of the questionnaire cannot be around what your manager gives you. That's just completely wrong. It has to be around what are your expectations, and how much do you think they're fulfilled. Because people have different expectations. You can have the same manager, and one person will feel like that manager is being, way too blunt or whatever, and another person will feel like, no, I like it. I like the way the manager talks to me, and it can be very, very different for the different person. So how can you then say, well, it's the manager's problem, right? To work out. But what you can say is, if the manager understands this one person wants much more diplomacy than the other person, it doesn't necessarily mean the manager's bad or wrong. It just means, okay, if the manager's smart, they'll understand that and see, okay, this person tends to be pretty sensitive, and I'll go softly with this person, but still, tell them the truth. But as soon as I start putting pressure on the manager, it's your responsibility to get people engaged. That's the wrong thing to do, because also sometimes managers don't even have the authority to say who they're going to hire, right? So they may get people put under them that have no passion for the job.
And actually, as you talk, Dan, you go back to the paradoxes again, because if I don't have the versatility to be diplomatic, and I have people around me who want diplomacy, I'm going to struggle, and that side of my paradoxical imbalance is going to exacerbate that situation.
Exactly.
And the other thing that might surprise people out there is that you can actually find out people's engagement expectations and whether or not they have. The other thing you do is you have the supporting traits. So it's okay somebody saying, I want development, but if they have a very low inclination towards self-improvement, for example, that creates a certain kind of conversation, doesn't it?
Absolutely. So we also couple what we call expectation factors with supporting behaviors. So that's a very, very good example in which they need to have the self-improvement in order to get that expectation fulfilled.
And you can actually measure this before you hire somebody, because it relates back to the way you've designed the enjoyment, performance, the job fit, right? And you can measure this. And if people are listening out there and saying, no, I don't believe you, I can tell you from experience, people fill this in. It's quite remarkable. They will complete this, and they will also tell you what their fulfillment levels are, even if it's the job that they're leaving. And that tells you something. You get somebody who has very low fulfillment in their expectations in their current job applying for a job versus somebody who has high fulfillment. That will change the dynamic around salary negotiations, a whole lot of things, because one person can't wait to get out of a job. The other person's going, I wouldn't mind working for you. It seems interesting, but I'm actually quite happy where I am. You're going to have, so it's going to be a different kind of conversation taking place there.
Absolutely.
And we're able to help people see that. So that helps that decision-making process before the person enters into the organization.
Right.
So you've built a whole bunch of really great, so starting off in psychology and assessment and working through enjoyment, performance, the job fit, the paradoxes. In the last 18 months, 2 years, you've built a lot of fantastic analytics tools, and just say a little bit about that and what might be coming up in the future, and give our listeners maybe one or two tips or advice on what they could do now to really explore this and start to really think about how they could make better and great talent decisions in 2022.
Well, the biggest thing, and I think is you could say the main theme we've been talking about, the biggest thing is really to understand that employment is a business relationship. And it's a two-way relationship, and both sides need to be satisfied for it to be a long-term and productive relationship. So getting people in the right jobs is the right thing. Looking at mutual expectations is really important. But if you really understand that, you'll do that through the entire process. So, for example, when I give an interview, I use our methodology. And in our methodology, we will look at what's important to the person. And we have an assessment in front of us, so that helps a lot, where we're able to see what's important to them, and we're able to discuss that. And we're able to say, okay, this is the areas where it looks like you might be a really good fit. Tell me more about that. How has this played out in your previous jobs? So we're able to then get a better sense of what they've done in the past with it as well, and sort of verify our assessment as well. And then, we're building the relationship with the person, because most people take an approach when they're hiring of screening people out. And that's the wrong idea. If you think about it from the viewpoint of a top performer who's likely to be your best candidate, right? To them, they know they're qualified. They know that they probably have multiple job offers. So you should build an interaction with them that's around their needs. But what are their needs? What are they thinking when they come in? They're thinking, am I going to enjoy this job? They're thinking, is this company going to be good for me? Is it going to be a nice place to work? Am I going to be able to fulfill my ambitions for my career at this company? That's what they're thinking. And what we generally do when we're conducting interviews is we do just the opposite. We're totally razor focused on what are they going to give to us? How are we going to make sure they give to us? We're mistrusting. We try to ask them trick questions. Totally the wrong thing to do. The right thing to do is to build the relationship by really looking at what's important to them. And in that process, be talking also about and being very disclosing about what the job involves and what we're going to expect from the other person. But in that process of discussion, having that happen, that completely changes the dynamics of the interview, and turns it into a very productive discussion. And I've had people who write me, after the interview that I did not hire, said, thank you so much. That was so helpful. I feel so empowered from the interview that you gave me, even though you didn't hire me. And I've also had people, where I looked at their fit, and, after going through the process of the interview, I could see, well, actually there wasn't as good a fit as I thought there might be. And I've suggested to them, look, this, we're probably not good for you. We're probably not a good situation, because what you want is something that's like this. And I suggest you can get this, in another place. And I tell them my suggestion. And they're so happy. They feel like, wow, this was fantastic. I get great reviews from that, people even people that we didn't hire. They said that was such a great experience. Right. And so it's that mental framework that the person has, which is the most important thing. As a recruiter, if you think of yourself as a gatekeeper, then you're making a mistake. But I understand how you might, because you need something that helps you assess that to begin with. So you need a two-way assessment to not be a gatekeeper. But if you have a two-way assessment, you're able to not be a gatekeeper, and you're able to construct your interview in a way that is completely not as a gatekeeper, but as someone who's exploring a mutual potential benefit of business relationship with that other person.
And another thing that's happening recently, where the data analytics, where you're able to look collectively at groups of people and at the culture of an organization, is a lot of organizations are starting. I'm hearing more and more. We're restructuring, we're reorganizing, we're coming out of COVID. The hybrid thing is contributing to that. But what do they do? Right? They go and they start restructuring it, and then they say, "Could you assess?" We want to put these people in those jobs. And so what happens is we become a kind of an insurance policy. It's like, we'll do the risk, the sort of due diligence for you. Whereas actually the opportunity is missed, because actually if they started off saying, who have we got? And where can we best make those people into roles where they're going to perform?
Where are they going to be their most productive selves? The truth is, it's easy to change organizational structure. It's a lot harder to change people's behavior patterns.
But organizations
you can do it. You can do it, but it takes time.
Well, organizations don't change; people change, and actually, people may not need to change dramatically if you understand them better. And that's where the data analytics, I think, are going to help people, help decision makers make those better decisions.
Well, it's also very important to tell you where the organization is struggling. So, where are your engagement levels low? Where is there poor job fits in the organization? Understanding that is just key to be able to say, then what do we do about it?